Hey, what's going on, everyone? Dan Wanis here with the Daily Fantasy Press. I'm finally getting the first podcast out of the year. My wife and I had to evacuate from South Florida for Hurricane Irma, so I was not able to get a podcast up week 1 or week 2. We have been providing content, though. For those of you first-time listeners, we provided PGA content this year. Had great success in that on Draftkings and FanDuel, and a number of our followers as well. So now we're shifting gears into NFL. We have a weekly membership for $2.99. You get an article by Brandon and I where we break down by position and pricing tier. We have an upper, mid, and a lower price tier for DraftKings for picks that we like. This is released typically on Wednesdays, and we make edits throughout the week as news comes out. Since we do get this out there Wednesday, we make edits all the way up until lock on Sunday as well. Our newest member of the team, Miles Gibson, he gives an article with an in-depth game-by-game breakdown, and he looks into individual player matchups, injuries, Vegas line movements, GPP targets he likes for the week. And this is typically released on Thursday. And once again, edits are made to that as well for injuries and other breaking news as the week goes on. And another thing you get with the membership is our Slack chat. So you are able to ask us any questions you have about lineup construction, GPP strategy, or any other questions you might have when building your lineup. So check that out. We've had some success here early on in the season and really look to build on it. Now that we've got 2 weeks behind us, we've got some more information on snap counts and which direction coaches are leaning for different positions. All right, so let's get into the picks this week. First, we've got Derek Carr, 6,800 on DraftKings. Carr is coming off a big game against the Jets last week. We knew the Raiders were going to be able to do whatever they wanted to the Jets, whether it was through the air, on the ground. They did both. Crabtree and Carr connected for 3 touchdowns last week. I think Crabtree's going to be a very popular stack with Carr this week. Currently, the Redskins Raiders have a high total of 54 points right now. Keep in mind, I'm recording this on Monday night, so things could change with injury news. Any of those things will be reflected in our articles as the week goes on. Now, the Redskins have faced Carson Wentz and Jared Goff the first 2 weeks. So nothing of the ability of Carr or the Raiders. And I think it's a great spot for the Raiders to really put up a lot of points here in a back-and-forth game that could have Carr throwing much later in the game than what we saw last week against the Jets. Like I said, I think Crabtree is going to be a popular stack with Carr. Cooper will be the low GPP owned player to target. I'm curious what Josh Norman is going to do in this scenario. One other stack I like with Carr is Jared Cook as well. So we will keep you guys updated with any matchups we hear about as the week goes on with this in our article. Next, moving on, Jay Ajayi at running back, 7,700. The Dolphins played the first game of the season last week, and Ajayi was just a workhorse for him. He carried the ball for 28 times and rushed for 122 yards against a solid Chargers defense. Ajayi gets a very favorable matchup this week against the Jets, who have given up 185 rushing yards per game, which is the most in the NFL. I think the game script works very well in Ajayi's favor. I think the Dolphins get out to an early lead, and they just continue to feed him the ball, similar to what we saw last week. as the bell cow for the Dolphins. Next, Ty Montgomery, 6,900. This is another week where we just get a free square with Ty Montgomery. His price is still not where it should be. His volume is just unmatched with anyone in this price range, and he gets an ideal matchup against Bengals defense that has given up 325 rushing yards in the last 2 weeks. Tymon has seen a ridiculous amount of snaps at 139, and he just has such a high floor with his receiving abilities. Now, 2 things to point out here as of Monday night. Jordy and Cobb are both on the injury report. We're going to have to monitor this situation as the week goes on, but if they are not able to go, I mean, that just puts Tymon in such a high usage scenario that you just have to plug him into your lineups and move on. Now, looking at wide receivers here, first we got A.J. Green at 8,100. And I think this week is a perfect storm for A.J. Green. Last week, they fired their offensive coordinator, and A.J. Green, I mean, he voiced his concern with the offense so far. It has not been good the first 2 weeks. And with the new offensive coordinator coming in, I really think they're just going to feed A.J. Green the ball. Andy Dalton has looked awful. If he wants to keep his job, he's going to have to target A.J. Green to give the Bengals a chance. And going up against the Packers, they're currently an 8.5-point underdog. And this Packers secondary it's nothing great. I think A.J. Green is able to handle them. Last night, King did look good in the secondary, but he's young. A.J. Green is an elite receiver, and we know the games he can go off for. And I think playing from behind with the game script in his favor, he's going to have plenty of opportunities as the night goes on. And also, Eifert is listed on the injury report, so we'll have to monitor this. And if he is out, I mean, that's just that many more targets going his way. Next, we've got Devontae Parker at 6,300. Last week against the Chargers, he was shadow covered majority of the game by Casey Hayward, which really opened up the passing game for Jarvis Landry. Now, I will point out, Parker actually led the team in receiving yards with 85, but Jarvis Landry had 13 receptions, and that's due to that shadow coverage that Parker had. Now, this week, against the Jets, the Jets have no one to shadow cover like Casey Hayward did to him. I think this is a game where Cutler goes back to his tendencies, targeting big body wide receivers like he had in Chicago with Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall. So I think this is a week to get Parker. He's going to be low owned. Jarvis Landry, everyone's going to see those receptions that he had and the targets, but that was due to the shadow coverage. So I love Devontae Parker this week at 6,300. Next, Kelvin Benjamin, 6,700. And with the injury news to Greg Olsen, I think we see a noticeable uptick in targets for Benjamin this week against the Saints. This is going to be another high-scoring game. The Saints secondary is the worst in football. They have given up 777 passing yards the past 2 games. I mean, that is so bad. And you're going to see some more targets from this game in our article. Another guy I want to look at this week and I want to have some exposure to in the big GPP tournaments is Shepard. He's going to line up in the slot, and the past 2 weeks we saw Adam Thielen and Chris Hogan roast the Saints out of the slot, and even Rex Burkhead lined up in the slot against the Saints and caught a touchdown. So I think I see this game as a big opportunity on the Panthers side to attack that secondary. with some of the guys they have there. And we'll have to see with Cam Newton also how healthy he is, because that's going to dictate the wide receivers out there as well. Now moving on to tight ends. First, we've got Jack Doyle at 3,600. Now, Doyle has played 116 snaps in the first 2 games and has ran the 5th most routes at tight end in the NFL. He charted 8 targets for 79 yards against the Cardinals. He gets a matchup against the Browns, who have given up 2 touchdowns to Jesse James in week 1. And last week, Ben Watson had 8 catches for 91 yards at tight end to exploit the Browns. Last week, we saw Jacoby Brissett basically just have Doyle as his safety blanket throughout the game, and he kept going to him. I think we see it again this week. We've seen it the first 2 weeks that the Browns have given up yards and touchdowns to the tight end. So I think at this price, Doyle is a great play at tight end. Also, we have Zach Ertz at 5,000. Ertz has the 2nd most targets this year of any tight end with 16. Since the departure of Jordan Matthews, he has been Wentz's favorite target these first 2 weeks. Ertz had some big games previously against the Giants, who they match up against this week. In 2015, he had 9 catches for 152 yards. And last season, he had an 8-reception, 97-yard game. So I think Ertz is a great target here, and we have seen he and Wentz have good chemistry. So I think that continues this week. All right, so let's move on to the last breakdown here of the value plays on DraftKings. First, we've got Rashard Higgins, priced at 4,000. Now, with Corey Coleman going down last week, Higgins really took advantage, posting 7 catches for 95 yards. Coleman is going to be out here for at least 6 weeks with a broken hand, so this is going to open some opportunities up for Higgins. Now, Higgins was a stud in college at Colorado State, and I think he has ability to take over as wide receiver 1 in Cleveland, especially with the disappointment so far we've seen with Kenny Britt. Now, Higgins is priced at 4,000 this week. I think his price is going to go up. I think this is a week to target him. He's in a good matchup. And like I said, he's going to have the targets available to him with Coleman going down. Next, we've got Devin Funchess, priced at 4,200. I wrote up Benjamin already, talked about him a little bit, but I want some pieces or additional pieces to this Panthers wide receiver core with Greg Olsen out in a very favorable matchup against the Saints. The Panthers coaches said today that they want to get Funchess more involved with the absence of Olsen, and he really has the ability to move around the field, line up in multiple positions. He's a good blocker. He's got the big physical body. And I think with Olsen out, it's going to open up opportunities and targets to Funchess. So at 4,200, great GPP play. He should be low owned. Now our last play on here is Trevor Siemian, and he is off to an awesome start this year. He, in 2 games, has thrown for 450 yards and 6 touchdowns. The Broncos match up with Buffalo this week, who have been actually really stout against the run, which I think is going to lend some opportunities through the air for the Broncos. Simeon's seen some really good pass protection these first 2 weeks, and this Broncos offensive line looks good. It's given Simeon the protection and time to look for receivers and really make his progressions throughout the offense. So I think at 5,500, you can't go wrong with Simeon in the matchup this week against Buffalo. Now, if you guys are not following us on Twitter, give us a follow at DailyFantasyPress. This YouTube video, if you like it, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. If you guys have any feedback, feel free to leave comments. Send us a message on Twitter. Once again, visit our website, DailyFantasyPress.com. There you will see the memberships. Like I said, we've got the articles throughout the week, Slack chat available for our members for any questions you guys have throughout the week. So be sure to check that out. Once again, we appreciate the following, the support, and I'm really looking forward to getting going here on week 3 of the NFL season. Best of luck this week, you guys.